let's start with a little bit of positive. I think it's important, right? It's easy to focus on the not so good, the negative, but there are some positive things. And there were some wins. And I do want to say, when we lose, we lose. But sometimes even when Democrats win, we still act like we lose. Like I can recall when we won last year, the presidential election, there were folks saying, did we really win? Did we really win? We didn't get enough of the Senate. We didn't get enough of the House. So a win is a win. And I can be fair when there was a loss, but I do want to say this, that former Obama intern, Justin Bibb, he wins his election to be the next mayor of Cleveland, 34 years old. He'll be the second youngest mayor in the city's history. We also have Pittsburgh elects their first Black mayor, Ed Gainey. Kansas City, Kansas elected its first Black mayor, Tyrone Garner, and I really like his platform. He has some really good stuff he wants to do. Alvin Bragg, he is Manhattan's new district attorney. Really important to have Black DAs. He is the first Black person to hold that job in New York, Manhattan, New York. That's good. Michelle Wu, first Asian American mayor in Boston. That's really good. Eric Adams, I wasn't a big supporter of his at all, but nonetheless, he is the second Black mayor of New York. Hopefully they treat him better than how they treated David Dinkins of New York. The NYPD rioted over David Dinkins in New York. That's some early 90s history for you, 1990s history. So there are some wins and there are some losses. And then there's Virginia. All right, so Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. Is that how you say his name? Youngkin?
Yeah.
Glenn Youngkin, he wins Virginia. So I want to say this, although I'm disappointed, this really isn't unusual. The last time we had a Republican governor of Virginia, it was in 2010. I believe his name was McConnell, I believe his name was. And that happened 2 years after Obama was elected. The same thing happened with Clinton and with Jimmy Carter as well. In Virginia. So it's not the end of the world here. It really isn't the end of the world. So I just want to put a little bit of perspective on it. All things aren't falling apart. This is Virginia, right? And even though we had Obama and Biden win, this is Virginia. But I want to focus on what I heard the brilliant Reese Colbert break down. Sometimes I'm thinking of something, then I watch a video and Reese Colbert breaks it down. Is for me, it's not focusing on Black voters. It's not focusing on, Virginia is not like a Georgia or Pennsylvania. So it really isn't the focus on Black voters. For me, it's a focus on the Southern strategy is still working.
Yeah.
See, this is the very reason why Republicans have never really worked to get the Black vote since 1964, because the Southern strategy works for them. And they might lose here or there a presidential election. That might happen. But for the most part, hey, we have this thing called the Southern strategy, which play on white fears, play on lies, play on racism, and you win. Republicans, they play the long game now. The long game. They're plotting and planning. When Lyndon B. Johnson wins in 1964, they said, oh, we're going to work this out. Barry Goldwater, Nixon, all of them playing the long game. So they use the same tactics they've been using since the 1960s. And I think for Democrats, I'll say more so they have to really rethink their tactics, because it's something new for them. How to really make sure Black voters, Black and brown voters resonate, but get outside of us, get their own people. Let me read you some stats here. Virginia exit polls. White evangelicals voted for Youngkin at 88%. 88%. 12% for McAuliffe. Am I saying his name right? McAuliffe?
Yeah, Terry McAuliffe.
White men voted for Youngkin, white men in general, at 66%. McAuliffe, 33%. White women, 57% for Youngkin. McAuliffe, 43%. Then, on removing Confederate monuments, the state of Virginia, the ones who supported Youngkin, 13% to remove Confederate monuments. 13%. For McCullough, it's 87%. So Youngkin played on fears. He used the lie of critical race theory, where there is no critical race theory issue in this state. And he used if y'all don't know Barry Goldwater, he was a demonic senator who said, in order for us to win the South, we're going to do this thing called the Southern Strategy. That's what they did. It's old school, and it still works. It still works. I want you to hear a little bit of Youngkin's victory speech. Listen to this.
How about that choice within the public school system? We're going to start with 20 charter schools, and we are going to make a down payment and close the gap on giving parents an opportunity to select where their kids go to school. Friends, we're going to embrace our parents, not ignore them. We're going to press forward with a curriculum that includes listening to parents' input, a curriculum that allows our children to run as fast as they can, teaching them how to think, enabling their dreams to soar. Friends, we are going to reestablish excellence in our schools.
Let me tell you something. That's some good Republican racist dog whistling. That's good. Because I think what they're kind of realizing is we do like Trump, we support Trump, but he's not coded enough. He's not coded enough for us. He's a little bit too explicit. So when he says something like, we're going to listen to our parents, he means the white parents who really don't want to hear certain things, certain truths being taught. That's what he means. When he says we're going to restore, we're going to school choice, meaning continue to defund public schools. That's what he means by that, which is going to affect a lot of Black and brown folks. And this idea of from day one, we're really going to teach these kids. Basically, let's avoid this idea of teaching anything about Black or brown people. So it's real good that makes them feel good, but it can't be racist because race wasn't even mentioned. So of course it can't be racist. I got to play this one clip that then I want you all to sound off. Here is a woman on Fox News yesterday calling out Fox News over, this is in Virginia, over critical race theory. Listen to this.
Mara, Brooke, thank you very much.
Can I say one thing about, I don't think people necessarily truly understand what critical race theory is. Younger children are not being taught critical race theory. They can't understand critical race theory. They're being taught history. So when somebody here in Loudoun County, I understand, was upset that his second grade child was taught that Christopher Columbus killed many indigenous people, that's part of history. That is what Christopher Columbus did. So I have a hard time. I think kids have to learn history, the good, the bad, the ugly, so they can become critical. I don't think anybody's against that. I think we have to do a fact check on the Christopher Columbus story as well. But, critical race theory, I think sometimes is a little bit of a misnomer because what's happening is that there's a sort of a reformed thinking and approach to history that teaches that the country was founded in racism. You can say critical race theory is like a legal theory that is found more in colleges. So maybe giving it.
She didn't even know how to handle that. She used to be on Fox News in the echo chamber. She said she got to do a fact check on Christopher Columbus and indigenous people. That's this on Twitter. I want to see the robust segment on Fox News during your show, Miss Martha, when you did this fact check on Christopher Columbus and indigenous people. Wait till you find out that Columbus didn't even step foot in the United States. Wait till you find that out. You're really going to be surprised by then. Reese Colbert, your thoughts?
There's so many thoughts rolling around. I'm still processing all of the information. the dog whistles are really good this time, really good this time. And the number one advantage that Republicans have when it comes to dog whistling is that it's actually a bullhorn on right-wing media. But the way that the average non-Republican actually gets their news is completely divorced from the right-wing media. Of course, aside from the fact that Sinclair Broadcasting has taken over a lot of local stations, but even local news, even more on the right-wing side, is still not as extreme as like the Fox News and OAN networks and things like that. And so I'm a person who saw these commercials from Glenn Youngkin, and I mentioned it last week, that said Terry McAuliffe doesn't think that, you know, parents should have a say in school curriculum and things like that. And to me, it didn't click that this was a kind of a wink and a nod to critical race theory. You know, because it didn't mention critical race theory in the commercials. It didn't mention Toni Morrison banning Beloved in the thing. So Democrats are at a little bit of a disadvantage because we really do silo ourselves. And then if you look at the way algorithms kind of also narrow where, you know, what we're ingesting, so we don't really see the bullhorns on the other side. So we kind of get a little bit caught off guard when education is the number one priority among voters. And what they really mean is critical race theory, which isn't even a thing, is their number one priority, which really means don't teach anybody about racism. Don't be honest about American history. And so we have to get better at really being hyper aware of what's being said on their side. You know, I don't think that people should necessarily have to take it upon themselves to go on these networks per se, because that audience isn't necessarily as persuasive or as is not easily persuaded. But, you know, like for instance, for me, I have Google News alerts for Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris. And the right wing is on her ass every day, all day. But I know what their attack points are, and they are very prolific with their attacks, and they pounce on everything. They always bring it back to her in some kind of way. But you have to know what the opposition is saying as a starting point. And then you have to actually fight back. And then you have to have your own persuasive message. I think one of the bigger things that we kind of concede with every midterms or off-year election is that it's not going to match the turnout of presidential elections. Part of that, I think, is because of burnout. You know, part of that is because people aren't as civically engaged because they're not given as much of a reason to. And so if you actually look at the tally, I know people are talking a lot about percentages and this percentage swing from Republican to Democrat or Democrat to Republican. But if you look in raw numbers, there were less votes cast for Glenn Youngkin than for Donald Trump in Virginia. You know, less votes cast than President Biden and Kamala Harris won in Virginia. And so there are gettable voters. There are Democratic voters that are staying home. There are Republican voters that are staying home. There are independent voters that are staying home in these off-year elections. And so we have to really find a way to turn out. It's always about turnout. But going to the voters every year now, because it's like damn near every year is election. The elections are 365 days a year, and saying, this is the most important election ever, vote or die, you're going to lose all your rights. It's just not compelling. People are checking out. So I know we're going to talk about a number of things, but one of my biggest pieces of advice is leave voters the fuck alone just a little bit. Give them a chance to like check out just a little bit.
To breathe.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want 100 emails. Oh, the stakes are high. Pitch in $5. We have to meet our mid-month deadline. We have to meet our end. Like, I hear so much from Democrats about money. Gimme. Every minute, it's people all over the country. I get text messages, I get emails. Leave people the fuck alone for just a little bit. And when you reach out, don't always have it be about money. They know how to message the hell out of chip in $5, chip in $10, but you don't know how to sell the American Rescue Plan, which nobody has been out there selling that I've seen. You're not selling the infrastructure plan. You're not selling Build Back Better plan the way that you need to. And so people are just checking out. So there are a number of things that we need to address, but we need to address voter fatigue. We need to address how these narratives about the importance of voting, which it is important, are just not resonating enough with Democratic voters and some independents, while on the flip side with Republicans, it's easy to get them riled up. It's easy to get them riled up.
Southern strategy. We don't have a Southern strategy. We don't have that. We don't have an equivalent of it.
Here's also the interesting part too, because I got dragged to hell and back, child, this weekend by ADOS and Foundational Black American and all the Twitter factions, because I had the audacity to say that a lawsuit settlement with the separated children is not reparations. Breitbart started this headline, glaring headline, Biden paying reparations to migrants. And that just set shit off on fire. And I knew it was, which is why I tried to kind of get in there and try to chop it off. Like, no, this is not reparations. It's a lawsuit settlement. There are 1,000 lawsuits, blah, blah, blah. But we have to also be concerned about the Southern strategy on Black voters, because that got people really in the tizzy. They was ready to chop my fucking head off. Like I was saying, give migrants reparations and don't give Black people reparations. So there's a Southern strategy being played on us. It's xenophobic. It's, class-based. It's a number of things. It's, when you also look at what's happening with COVID still being a thing. People are sick of COVID. They're sick of talking about vaccines. They're sick of talking about masks. They're sick of talking about, you can't go indoors. So there's so many things working against the Democrats that the Republicans can keep people ginned up about. And to your point, Clay, we don't have a compelling alternative, even though our policies are better, even though our results are better. We still aren't putting it together in a compelling way for voters.
Dr. Ted, what's up?
Yeah, man. So look, I have a lot of, like Greasy, I got a lot of thoughts on this. Some of them y'all alike, and some of them you may not. Here's the first thing. Race is and has been for at least the last 150 years the primary organizing principle of American politics. And so at least since the 15th Amendment, that's been true. Nothing changed yesterday, that remained true. The other part of this is hyperpartisanship. The political polarization in our society turns every single race, from city council to mayor's races to governor's races, into a caricature of Donald Trump on one side and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the other. It's the rich white man who is the born on Flag Day, who is the representation of, the American dream, versus the young working class woman of color who isn't an immigrant, but, fits the mold, that's trying to implement socialist policies in the United States. That's the caricature of the Republican Party and the Democratic Party right now. And it ruins local and state politics, and frankly, politics generally, when voters approach every race as if they're choosing between one of those two people. So and so then we come to Virginia. In 2017, 67% of the folks that voted in the gubernatorial election were white folks. Yesterday, 74% of the people who voted in the election, in the Virginia gubernatorial election, were white folks. Turnout was higher. And so as much as we talk about the changing demography of the United States, the electorate ain't changing as quickly as the country. Exactly. In the presidential election, I think it was 74% of the people in the presidential election were white voters. It just so happened that Black folks in the right places showed up to flip a few states, but we know it was just 40,000 votes across 3 states that gave Biden the win in the Electoral College.
We were around 63%, 62, 63%, and during the presidential election. Go ahead.
White voters or?
No, Black voters. We were around the low 60s.
Oh, and turnout, right? But I mean, in share of the electorate, we were like, right. I want to say, 13 or 14 around there somewhere in terms of, one in every 6 people who voted was a Black person, whereas 3 out of every 4 people who voted were white folks. This is why the Southern strategy works, because even though the nation is changing, the people who are voting looks very much the same today as it did 20, 30 years ago, where 75% of the people who are voting are white people. So in order to change the outcome of our elections to match the will of the public, as Reese said, turnout is the name of the game, especially in communities of color. And this is why we see all these voter suppression laws popping up across the country to keep voters of color away from the polling places, because that will change election outcomes. Now, here's the part that y'all might not like as much. I live in Fairfax County, Virginia. It's pretty much a battleground. I mean, there's like some like center-right Republicans in this city, in this county, and some progressive Democrats. The reason Youngkin didn't have to say critical race theory in his a lot of advertising talking about McAuliffe saying parents don't have a place in schools is because a lot of people in Virginia, especially in the Fairfax County area, were upset with how the state handled COVID in public schools. And so he didn't have to call out race specifically, because people were not happy with the broadband situation, the learning from home, the mask policy, the vaccine, like how slowly everything happened, how indecisive the school board was. And so by Youngkin saying, we're going to listen to parents instead of having bureaucrats shove things down your throat, it was a dog whistle for critical race theory, but it also tamped on local energies and population centers in the state around COVID response or the dissatisfaction with it. And to the Republican strategists' credit, they were able to kill two birds with that one stone of talking about McAuliffe in schools. And some of that proof is that Black men and Black women supported McAuliffe based on exits about 12-13% each. Usually Black men double Black women and their support for Republican candidates. In Virginia yesterday, it was even. That's not common, but it's because Black women care about education, maybe more than any other demographic in the country. And if they were upset, I could see how instead of 1 in 20 voting for a Republican, maybe 1 in 7 or 1 in 7 would. The last thing I'll say is sort of a third rail on this is the school choice debate. The last poll I saw was Black families are the highest increase in homeschoolers in recent years. And when it comes to school choice, something like 60 to 40 Black households prefer choice over sort of mandated attendance based on your district, not because choice leads to better outcomes, which is Republicans argue that's not true. It's that if all the schools are going to fail my child, I at least want to put my child in a school where I think they will thrive most instead of being forced into the bad school that may be closest to me. So this is a long way of saying that what happened yesterday isn't a signal that Republicans have figured something out. It's not a signal that that they have found a new way to dog whistle in ways that sort of like tap on 3 different aspects of an issue to include the dog whistle. And they didn't get smarter. They didn't get more appealing. In Virginia, it was just the way the state had operated since COVID. It was, and the candidate that was running, McAuliffe, who had already been governor, people knew what they'd had before, and they thought they were going to get more of that based on what had happened in the last 18 months. And I think that plus turnout led to Youngkin's victory. This is not a Trump victory. This is not a Republican Party rebranding victory. This is Youngkin being a perfect combination of newness, Romney, and Trump to win in a Virginia where white folks were three out of every 4 voters.
I just want to add, though, I definitely hear you. I saw the stats as far as Black men and Black women voting for Youngkin at about 12-13%. But I do want to say that nonetheless, Black men and Black women voted for McAuliffe higher than any other demographic.
Anyone else?
So I just want to put that out there. The flip side of those numbers, more than any
that's a fair
Latin Asian.
That's right. That's a fair point. Still are the most loyal. And the folks who flipped this election were white, non-college folks. They supported Youngkin at rates you would not believe, that even better matched or even better than Trump did. And certainly when it comes to turnout in real numbers. So for sure, Black folks still the most loyal Democratic base there is, and that's not changing in Virginia or anywhere else anytime soon.
But Reese, before I go to you, I want to ask Ted one more question. You said there was a caricature of the crazy Donald Trump on one side and someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on the other side. This is where it's polarizing. This is how it's represented. So you're saying that's the caricature. What should be the accurate representation then?
So I think for Democrats, there isn't one. And that's the part of the challenge Democrats have, is it is a diverse party. So there is no one person that is the exemplar. Maybe Kamala Harris is the closest you get to it, in terms of diversity of positions, her education, the positions she's held, and sort of where she fits in the ideological spectrum. Pragmatic on some issues, progressive on some issues. She may have, for a party as ideologically, racially diverse as the Democratic Party, maybe she's the median Democrat right now. Whereas on the Republican side, they're predominantly white, period. And so it's easier to look at a Youngkin and see Romney and see, Tom Cotton, and like there's a mold that they fit that it's easier to rally around than it is for Democratic Party. I don't know who the new face, if it's not Trump, I don't know who the new face of the Republican Party is, but I know it will be a white man. For the Democratic Party, I don't know who the new face of the Democratic Party is, and I don't know what gender they are. I don't know what race they are. I don't know what their class background is. And because of that, the caricatures are so powerful because the exemplars of the party are harder to nail down on the Democratic side.
I agree. Reese, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to just throw back to the point that I made last week, and I think I might have made it a little bit earlier, is what the average like Fox News watcher, non-MSNBC watcher saw from Glenn Youngkin was more along the lines of a Mitt Romney, not along the lines of a Trump. And so I can understand, and I said this last week, why he might not have seemed like that bad of a guy if you're not plugged in to all of this right-wing stuff, because he did not present himself that way. In fact, there was a commercial that Terry McAuliffe ran where Glenn Youngkin is on, like, kind of being secretly recorded saying, oh, I don't want to put it out there like that. I wait till after I'm elected. So, Glenn Youngkin was conducting himself for much of the election as a person who's, not even right or left, but just like completely like not even policy ideologically driven whatsoever. I mean, he was like, the most crazy thing to me was his first commercial was he's a white guy walking in a sea of white guys against them, but he's taller and thinner and younger looking. And so I guess he's supposed to be like changed. It was like ridiculous to me, but he did not run as this like lunatic Trump Republican character, like you said. And so people trying to kind of paint him that way in the 25th hour, because I think that McAuliffe was really late and really trying to do that. And I think that Youngkin also kind of let his crazy fly a little bit more on the home stretch to kind of get his people riled up. But by then, like I said, the average person viewing it doesn't see this extreme guy. And he was very light on policy. His entire, none of his campaign stuff, the only policy he talked about apparently was this whole CRT, school choice, winking and nod. That was the only thing I ever saw from him. So, I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that there is two sides, there are two faces to these Republican winning candidates that really disguise how sinister they are to the average public.
I want to go to a break, but I do want to say this, and we're going to talk more after the break, but let's remember this, y'all. We aren't going to win every election.
Right.
So for folks who are upset, who are frustrated, even for our listeners in Virginia, we have a huge base in Virginia on SiriusXM Urban View. We're not going to win every election. We're going to have an election where we have another president who's a Republican. It's not going to be a Democratic president for the rest of our lives. We're not going to always have a Democratic governor. We're not going to always have two Democratic senators in Georgia. We're not going to win every election. So I encourage people to not be discouraged, because this is just not how, even in Jersey right now, it's possible Phil Murphy might lose in Jersey. We had Chris Christie before. This is how politics work. No party wins all the time. So for all the anger, the frustration, the disappointment, for folks who were pounding the pavement for McAuliffe, I get it, but you just don't always win. You just don't always win. Republicans, they were outraged over John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock, and they were outraged that Pennsylvania he lost, but you just don't win every time. So don't be too upset. Don't be too sad about it. Don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think we're going back. I could be wrong. I don't think we're going to go back to America 1877. I could be wrong, but I don't think we are. And if y'all don't know 1877, look at the Compromise of 1877. I don't think we're going back there, because the electorate is different. It is different than what it was in 1877. It's the parties are different. They've switched, but you don't always win. So when you don't win, you get more invigorated. You reach out to more people. Maybe you out there, you decide to run, but that's not how life works. Listen, in Jersey, we had Chris Christie. He was a disaster, and that's just how these things work sometimes. So let's keep that in mind.